So since you all just decided to stop sending me intro videos, I guess I have to do this myself. This is, and this will always be, 34. Good morning, fire trucks and Andrew Lux. It's the morning. It's November 17th. I'm on a walk, a leisurely walk to start my day, and it's Tuesday. And there's no better way to start a Tuesday than with a day in the Word. My head's moving a lot. All right, time for a day in the Word. Before I start today's section of A Day in the Word, I want to explain these.
Unfortunately, that is the current state
Of my eyes. Double pink eye. So in an attempt not to gross you out even further, I'm gonna wear these. Let's get to Day in the Word. Okay, so last week we tackled Galatians chapter 1, and each week on Tuesday for A Day in the Word we're going to go through the book of Galatians. And if you missed that, then stop right now, go back and watch this video, and then come back. Today, for those of you who are caught up, we're going to tackle Galatians chapter 2. And I'm just going to dive right in. Here we go. But before we do that, I noticed that last week's vlog, especially with this section, was really, really long, and a lot of it was just like listening to me reading. So I'm going to try something new this week. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, for this section, we're going to read Galatians blank through blank. And then I'll throw up on the screen a little like, read Galatians blank through blank. And you can pause it, read that section, and then I'll talk about that section. And that way, for those of you who are faster readers than I am, you don't have to wait for me to read it. And in the comments below, let me know which you preferred, me reading it out loud or you being able to pause and read for yourself. Okay, for this first part, I want you all to now read Galatians 2, verses 1 through 10. Be right back. Okay, so this section, this beginning of chapter 2, is a continuation of what Paul was talking about in chapter 1, which we talked about last week. This idea that the gospel that he has heard and the grace that he has received, he's making the case to these Galatians that it was not from men, but it all came from God. And now he's talking about when he finally went and he met up with the disciples. And I don't necessarily really understand everything that's happening in this section, but there is one part that really, really spoke to me. And that was in verse 7. It says, "They recognized that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle to the Gentiles." And so basically what I find that they're deciding here is that Peter and James and John should continue to preach to the circumcised Jews, and then they're saying, Paul, you continue to go preach to the uncircumcised Gentiles. And we'll talk about the big differences between circumcised and uncircumcised and Jew and Gentiles. But the main thing that I'm pulling from this is that this is one of the first times, especially in this book, but in the Bible as a whole, that we're beginning to get a sense and a hint that this message of the gospel, or this grace that comes from faith in Jesus Christ, this is for everybody. It's not just reserved for the circumcised Jews, but also to the uncircumcised Gentiles. And this, in this day and age, was something that was completely revolutionary. It would have blown people's minds that something, a gospel, a grace this beautiful would be not just for a specific group of people, because that was these people's understanding of religion up until this point, that certain religions are deemed for a certain group or sect of people. But here comes Paul, and here comes these disciples, and they're coming to this realization that this grace, it's for everyone, regardless of where you come from, regardless of what you've done, regardless of who you've been. This grace is for everyone. And so that was kind of the first thing that I wrote down. I wrote down, the good news is for all and should be preached to all. Let's move on now and let's go to the next verse and read verses 11 through the end, through 21. I'll see you in a second. Okay, so to understand this section, I think it's really important now to tackle the differences between Jews and Gentiles. Now, the Jews, that's a bit more simple. Pretty much we all know who the Jews are. They're the descendants of the Hebrews, which is God's chosen people. And the Gentiles, that's basically everyone else. And the Jews are those who are committed to following a lot of these Old Testament laws. And one of those laws was this law of circumcision. And if you want to know all the specifics about the circumcision laws, you can go back into the Old Testament, into Leviticus, and read all of the specific words and all of the specific mandates. But basically, it's this idea, it states that all boys, all men should be circumcised, and if they're not, they're considered unclean or sinful or wrong in God's eyes. So you can understand a bit more now why this message of the gospel, the grace given by God, is for everyone, both circumcised and uncircumcised, is revolutionary and very controversial among some people. Now, let's talk about this section. Honestly, a lot of the first part where it's talking about Cephas, who is Peter, I think, at least that's what my footnote says. It's just another name for Peter. A lot of this first section sort of confuses me, just sort of the timeline of exactly what Peter is doing. But I do think, even though I can't understand all the specifics of the story and really follow the timeline, I do think that I understand the grand point that Paul is making here. And the point that Paul is making here is that grace is greater than the law. And that's what I sort of wrote down in my notes. I wrote grace and a big greater than sign, the law. And then I wrote verses 11 through 21. And I get that from verses like verse 15 and 16 where it says, "We who are Jews by birth and not sinful Gentiles know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ." And so it's this idea that even though these Gentiles, these uncircumcised people, have not followed all of the customs of the Jewish law, that grace is still available to them. Because grace is greater than the law. We cannot earn that salvation. And that's kind of what I wrote down. I wrote down, salvation is not earned by righteous acts or birth or anything other than God's grace, which is open to all. So that's it for a day in the Word today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and specifically share your thoughts on which you preferred. Would you rather me go through and read it out loud, or did you like this where you could pause, read at your own speed, and then sort of I unpack it afterwards? Let me know which option you liked. And as always, let me know if you're still liking this segment. I enjoy filming it, but if you all don't like it, I'm not going to do it anymore. That's all. Good morning, sweet bear. How you doing?
I'm sick.
You sick? I got you sick. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We can be sick together.
Oh my, really? Oh my, really? You love the camera, don't you? My, really?
Say hi, everybody. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the kisses. And the belly scratch. The belly scratch.